So hello, my name is Heather Midori Yamada, and I'm going to give us a short tour and a very short sneak peek into the work that I'm doing currently. And the work that we're going to be looking at will eventually be in a solo show in Victoria at the Gage Gallery the first week of August. So I wanted to actually talk about some of the ways in which I arrive at patterns. And I use Japanese washi papers, and you're going to see how actually transparent some of them are. So this is a wonderful heritage paper, and what that means is that the paper makers in Japan have been doing this for very, very long periods of time. And one of the characteristics of these papers is that, so you can see how transparent they are in terms of how much of the image underneath passes through. But they're also very, very strong, and they come in different tints. So these are whites, but they reflect mostly the actual fiber. So you can see here that a lot of these gestures are quite similar. And so what I will do is I will work on these papers independently from my canvases, and I do a number of them, and I allow the gestures to work into kind of variations, and then I basically put them away, and I kind of catalog them in a sense, not knowing, how they're going to be used at the end. So the intention here is really to work very definitely with movement of the body, allowing things to bleed, soak through. So for instance, with the using the metallics here, so the metallic acrylics will hold the gesture, and because they've been mixed in with other pigments, you get this beautiful bleed. So I'm always working wet on dry and then wet on wet. So even though they're acrylics, the methods are very much like a watercolor technique. So then from there, we can move over here. And once I've done a number of different kinds of patterning, so these are other older pieces. So in this case, the white part actually has been stopped out with beeswax, and again you can see there's quite a bit of metallic inference. And then what I will do is then I start to go through the things that I have, including some of these papers, these beautiful washi papers, come this color. So there are certain papers that I cannot hand make, they come that way. But what I will do then is I go through my hand-painted ones, and I start to separate them and put them into kind of color groupings. So here we have, the blue-green, sometimes a little bit of the orange pokes through, but, this box is mostly blue-green, yellow, like that. And so when I start to actually bring things together, so here's an example where I've done that same kind of, you'll notice that same kind of gesture on the canvas. So the canvas is a raw canvas that has been treated with a clear gesso, so it's not actually raw. And what happens is there's a kind of a tooth that happens, so same thing, it's mixed in with color and using water, so I'm able to get the strong gesture that stays, and then this really liquid fading out onto the canvas. And at that point, so once I have, in this case, you'll see there's been two very strong gestural marks made, and that at a certain point I start to bring in the papers that I've been squirreling away, and I start to play with spatial relationships and color relationships, and decide, for instance, when I look at this particular work, is it finished? Well, of course it can always be finished, but then, does it need something else? So there's a lot of time that's required to actually sit with the pieces. So there's a kind of contemplative aspect to it. So it's a little bit like certain kinds of sports where you know, the baseball player is sitting there waiting for something to happen, waiting for nothing's happening. Something's happening over here. And suddenly there's, you know, the batter strikes the ball and then everybody runs like crazy. So there's a kind of an analogy to this because the gesture, can't, you know, there can't be any fudging or indecision. So the gesture is has to be quite sure, not necessarily fast, but sure, and you cannot go back. So it's unlike oil. Okay, once this is down, that's it. I can't take it back, you know. But then I have to look at it. And I look at the spatial things that happen, and then with the papers, you know, I cut them, I tear them, I place them, I move them around, say, okay, is that enough? Does it need another? So sometimes it helps to look at the thing upside down. So as I'm speaking to you, I have a new paper here, a new Japanese paper here. I look at this and I go, oh, maybe this needs that beautiful, I don't know, I'll see. I'll see what happens. So that's a little bit of the process. There's another one here where the paint is actually drying, and as it's drying, I see something that actually shouldn't be there. So, okay. And we can go into the other room. Examples of the canvases that are really in their first and second stages. So, in these three canvases, they've had really two or three different, how should I say, stages of color, or in some cases there's actually a pale white tint at the top of this, and it's a little bit more obvious on this one. So there's a white on white tint here that's I'm looking at, and then I have to kind of sit with it. I look at this particular one is a diptych, so I look at it upside down, right side up. I look at them on the floor. I look at them standing up, and I go, okay, what is it? What does it need? What is it calling? And then what I do is I go through mentally a lot of the patterning that I've done previously, and I go, oh, that circular thing that was. Then I run to the other room, pull it out, and say, oh, does this belong here? So the process is actually quite long, even though the gesture itself very short. But the actual bringing them together takes as long as it takes.